Hello and welcome to this, the 15th webinar in the Commonwealth Tribute to Life series. My name is Ben Ivory. I am a consultant in critical care medicine and anaesthesia from Torbay Hospital in South Devon, and I have a role with NHS Blood and Transplants in the UK as the National Medical Education Lead for organ donation. This session is all about education and organ donation, and we're very lucky to be joined by two fabulous speakers today. This is, as much as the webinar can be, we want this to be as interactive as it possibly can. So please, any questions you have, please put them into the chat at the bottom, and we'll have a session at the end of both of our speakers' talks today where you can ask questions of them and the panel. I'm going to start things off by introducing David Thompson. David is a consultant transplant surgeon and critical care specialist from Groote Schuur Hospital. Did I get that right? Yeah. Close enough, in Cape Town, South Africa. He has a particular interest in organ donation education and has set up the online organ donation course that I'm sure he's going to tell us about now. So I will hand over to David.
Cool. Thanks very much for the introduction, Ben. Can I get a thumbs up from someone to say the slides are good? Cool. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you today about donation education, and specifically an aspect that's come to the fore of late in terms of online education. Having been through a process for this, through the process of creating one of these resources. And I think it's important to realize that we, let me just minimize these images here. There we go. I think it's important to realize that we often teach components of this organ donor pathway, but we often don't synthesize it down for our undergraduates and for the public and for our subspecialist trainees into a very coherent pathway. And I think your education resources need to try and condense it through, because everything needs to be interpreted in context. And I think it's a real public health imperative. Everyone thinks, well, organ donation and transplantation sits right at the top of the pyramid in terms of accessing healthcare and all the expensive resources. But actually, it comes from good end-of-life care and considering organ and tissue donation as part of that process. So I really think we need to reframe our education push across the world in terms of organ donation, in that it's a public health imperative that we create ambassadors. And why do I say this? I say, look, there's marked variability around the world in terms of the number of deceased donors per million population. So everyone's doing it in different ways, but we're all educating, and there's common purpose to what we're trying to educate about. And ultimately, it boils down to we need to create a culture of donation, because you don't get a heart transplant if you don't have a consented donor. And we teach aspects of brain death. And I think that this in my undergraduate career stuck with me as a process that's very scientific. But if I think about where I was taught about diagnosing circulatory death, that was very much taught on the fly after I was a doctor. Maybe I missed that lecture, but it didn't really stick as much as the brain death complexity did stick with me. And what I definitely wasn't taught about is how to deal with a grieving family, which is very definitely a skill that you need to develop, and we need to populate more widely into our healthcare professionals. And I just put this slide up because it varies around the world. And this is actually the South African hierarchy of consent, because in South Africa, and I think around in quite a few jurisdictions, you still need the legal next of kin to sign. We haven't changed our legislation to be authorization. And so we still require informed consent. We don't have a registry that presumes consent. And I think it's always, even in the highest performing system in Spain, they will still ask the family. It's not that responsibility is ever abrogated. So we have to go about this, and we need to teach it on a local level and give people the context. And often we've got a hierarchy here, but it's not actually one specific person. It's actually a family discussion, which involves multiple role players. And we have to understand that we're creating ambassadors. And there's only a few of us who have the privilege of working in transplantation, but there's a lot more doctors treating a lot of people at the end of life. And we need to give them the context in which they operate so that they understand their role to play, because we can't live as an isolated tower. And I really like this slide to say, can you become an organ donor? It's very subtle. There's a recycle sign in the lady's cornea. And we need to think, if we're going to create a culture of donation when we educate about organ donation, that it really is a reflection of a bigger picture of end-of-life care. And tissue donation very definitely comes to the fore, because it's very rare that someone dies in a brain dead mode on a ventilator. And actually tissue donation familiarizes people with the family discussion and what the options are to donation, independent of a mechanical ventilator. So I really think it's important that we synthesize things together when we educate about organ donation. And tissue donation is not highlighted for the tendons and the cardiac valves, but you can very definitely have emotive slides related to the skin being used for children in the pediatric burns unit. So I'm going to focus the rest of this talk on a course that we put together in our local environment. It's a course that runs on the Open University or the university platform called Coursera.org, and it's called Organ Donation from Death to Life. And it was an attempt to synthesize these down into an online resource that then could get spread more widely. Because in South Africa, we've got 9 medical school universities, but only 4 of them actually offer transplantation. So the other 5 universities don't have transplant programs in them. And our infrastructure for donation is very much linked to the transplant centers themselves investing that resource. We haven't got it embedded in ICU, which is the right way to go around when you want to start considering it routinely. So we created a series of videos. They're all quite short that go into this. Most of them are a talking head with highlights in terms of what the different levels are and text to highlight it. And we tried to challenge assumptions. So our model for the brain death simulation that we filmed a reenactment for very definitely challenges the stereotype, because he would classify as obese. We added some diabetes and hypertension to the scenario. This gentleman's not dead. He's the cleaner from the trauma unit who volunteered. And we set it up to film it and reenact it to give it a local context and a flair. And we also added interviews. And these have actually been quite positively received by the trainees in terms of what resonates with them and what lectures actually stick with them. And interviewing the recipients all from a single donor was very powerful. We also cut away to lots of images, because a talking head can be quite monotonous, and you don't want to have that. You don't want to lose your audience. So we cut away to as many images as we could to make it interesting. And here you can see a coffin fitted with a bell. And the message here is that medical science has advanced far enough that we don't need to do this anymore. You don't have to have any uncertainty when you bury someone. But to put that in context, we had to make a script. You've got to actually time where the cutaway is into the video, who's going to be saying what, so that the editor can put it through, and you break everything down into the videos. As I said, for the modern attention span, the learning designers tell me 3 to 8 minutes is the maximum you'll keep them onto a topic. So you really have to distill it down. You're not allowed any ums and ahs, and you have a strict script that you're following. And then we cover broad topics. So we used a round the world approach, because a lot of what's happening is people's understanding of the organ donation system is shaped by popular media. It may not be applicable to their local jurisdiction, and you need to put things in a global context and then have the students actually empowered to go and interrogate what is their local context and understand it a little bit more. So we have lectures dealing with religion, culture, and spirituality. And then we cover things like opt-in, opt-out, often gets touted as the magic bullet to fix the system. And you need to place that into context, because I think it's a common misperception that that's all we need to do to make ourselves better. And I think everyone on this call and the educators very definitely know that it's not a one-stop shop. It's not one lecture and you've convinced someone for life. Learning is a lifelong undertaking. So you want to place it into context for people in terms of prioritizing things. There's a perception that people are able to access healthcare based on their money. And we've got a specific lecture that deals with money and organ trafficking, because you need to give people the full picture in order to, give them the context and the faith in the system that it's appropriate. So we cover issues like, can you be on multiple waiting lists? That varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. It's not allowed in South Africa. And then we focus on what are the high performing centers. And like I said before, opt-in, opt-out isn't the magic bullet, but there's some other very core processes that you need to have in place if you want to be at the top of the pile. So we use a round the world approach, because everyone has challenges and had lots of different solutions. And I think we've got options. You need to understand your local context, but you also need to understand that we need to be continually striving to get better. So each week essentially adds up to 1 hour of video content. It's divided as a 4-week course, all in these short videos for the modern attention span and adapted for low bandwidth to consume on mobiles. And then we actually embedded practice MCQ quizzes. So there's no administration aspect. Once it runs, it automatically marks and grades people. At the end of every few videos, you've got a practice MCQ giving feedback. And actually to graduate, you need to pass an end of week 20 mark MCQ with a 75% pass mark. It locks you out if you try and brute force crack the system by just doing the MCQs and get your certificate. That's a bit disingenuous. So actually it shuffles the questions, changes them up, shuffles the answers so that you can't actually graduate the course. It's still more efficient for you to actually watch the hours worth of video content. And then we divided it into the 4 weeks. So actually on the public forum, when you create these, the learning designers tell you, well, everyone signs up and wants to do it, but they actually drop out after the first week. So the first week's actually a little bit heavy because the two concepts that we had to get across is brain death and consent. And if you stop at that point, we were very happy that we got something in at least. Week 2 takes it further in terms of donation after circulatory death. And then we put it in context for the learner in terms of the organ donor process. How do you get on the waiting list? How is it allocated? And we have the interviews with the recipients. And then we focus on system issues in terms of those ethical things related to money and transplant, travel and organ trafficking, religion and culture, and then actually some system-based improvements in terms of how can we improve our public awareness campaigns and how do we go about improving deceased donation, because I think it's somewhere where everywhere can still get better. In terms of the process, for me, it started with a very interesting meeting with a huge table to try and get some funding from the university. They'd invited some proposals for this because in this massive open online course space, no one quite knows what to make of it. Is it an education resource? Is it an advertising resource for your university to bring the fee-paying students into your university? I very definitely approached it as I'm using this opportunity to create a teaching resource. So this is our university. If you want to come and visit it, it's very nice in person, but we've created this virtually so that it can go around the world. And it was done through the Center of Innovation and Learning and Teaching at the university. And we created it from scratch because, as I said, it didn't exist in the curriculum as a coherent whole entity, and this was a way to insert it as a complete package into curriculums around the country. So design, create, and then to publish it. And it took myself as the clinical academic, and then we had 2 learning designers and a project manager to keep the lazy academic moving forward. And then we had presenters presenting it, and we had 2 people filming it, and we had a graphic designer to help for all the graphics. And we had to create the content because we wanted to license it under Creative Commons, which means you can share it and you can adapt it and remix it and transform it. You just have to cite where it came from. So we made it completely freely available. Unlike satire in the United States and their evening shows where they can appropriate any image in the name of a joke, we're not able to do that. And images like this that you Google and put into your PowerPoint nice and productively are actually owned by Getty Images. And because they would lose the license to resell it if you license it under a Creative Commons, this is an extortionate amount of money, in my opinion, to be able to own the rights for this image. So we had to create all our images and all our graphics ourselves. And here you can see the big Google Drive folder with the images that we wanted to create, to cut away and make the videos interesting. And we wanted to film, again, not a dead person, actually an ICU consultant who goes to the gym quite often. And this was one of the learning designers who came along from one of the other projects. And we wanted to show the whole process. We didn't want to remove any aspect. And then this is just actually the counseling process that goes through filming a reenactment for donation after circulatory death, where you had to educate everyone in the room. And for our donation after circulatory death program here, it feels like this happens in real life each time as well. This education resource will hopefully lessen that burden each time. So we end up with the videos, which we were quite happy with the quality. You do have to sort out your lighting, and that's Boitumelo lying just to sort out how are we going to set this up for the next day when everyone comes through. And then you do need your different angles. The gentleman behind is controlling the teleprompter, and he controls the speed at which you talk. So you need to have a good relationship with your teleprompter. And then we cut away with the graphics. And we have two angles so that when you can edit the two takes together for all the flubbed lines, and then they can cut it together at the end. And you actually end up with programs which can edit videos and allow comments like this is an academic journal article that people can flag a point in a video for something to be changed by the videographer. So how does it work in terms of the operation? You create this resource, and then you've actually got to operationalize it. So we've managed to incorporate it into the curriculum. And I have to say, if you're going to educate people, you need to build it into the requirements. I had it as a voluntary option, as a module, and I can tell you the uptake is very poor. So you really need to incorporate it as an expectation. And then it's run seamlessly since that point. So we give one lecture at the start to just make sure they can sign up, and we run a private instance for our students because we can do it over customized dates that way. It runs monthly on a public forum. And then we do a flipped classroom model after they've completed it to give that feedback and that interaction. And then we don't actually include it in the overall mark. We just expect them to complete the completion certificate. We've managed to include it in other universities, but I just want to say that you need a local champion. If you create these resources, you need to empower people locally to be able to use them and to have that feedback. And then you need to slot it into the curriculum, as I said. So we've got a staff member administering the course, and actually we just need a spreadsheet with names and email addresses, and you can drag and drop it into the back, and the course will actually automatically invite them through their email on the start date. And then they don't get asked for any payments for the course. The one thing to understand about Coursera is that they do try to recover the costs for running this, so they charge for a completion certificate. Our course is completely free to audit, but these paywalls can be confusing to navigate. And if you apply for financial aid, you can actually get a completion certificate for free, and all they do is check that your IP address is from a developing world. So it gets a little bit confusing that way. So running it in the back end is much easier. And there you can see the class list, and you create an instance, and you can follow your students through in terms of their progress. So this is just to show you Coursera is a big university, and I've mentioned that the financial paywalls just to be aware of. If you can host it offline, and I think Sunil's going to talk to you about that is definitely a good way to go. And then you can get, this is the back-end statistics are very good in terms of the unique visitors, the number of people enrolled in the course, and how many actually complete the course. And there are big dropout rates, but you can see your demographic that you're reaching, you can see where you're reaching in the world. India is our second biggest consumer, and then followed by the United States. So it's been quite an interesting journey to see that. And then you can also see the analytics from you've got lots of people doing your MCQs, so you really can feedback to see where your questions are really assessing knowledge. Are they accidentally testing English grammar, which is a big problem with setting MCQs? And you can grade your questions. And I think I'm running out of time, but I'm just going to say that it's been well received. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor to invest in this resource, but it does depend on local champions from different places to run it and extend the reach of it. You can't just create the resource and then not direct people to it and administer it. So I'll stop there and invite any questions. Or I think we're going to move on to the next talk.
Yes, I'll hand over to Kathy at this point to introduce our next speaker, and we'll do questions at the end.
Thank you, Ben. It's with great honour I introduce Sunil Shroft for today's talk. Sunil is a world-renowned transplant surgeon who specialises in urology. He's also the president at the Indian Society of Organ Transplantation and a trustee of the Mohan Foundation. And we look forward to hearing Sunil's educational insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And good morning or afternoon to all of you. I will just share my screen, if I could. Give me a second, and then we'll get started. A very interesting talk from David, and there are a lot of commonalities between my talk and his talk, but I'll try and keep it simple and show you what we are doing as far as training and capacity building is concerned to improve our disease donation rate in India. I have no financial disclosures, no conflict of interest. I am a trustee of a foundation. This is a non-government organization. This is a 25-year-old NGO. We have 4 wings in our organization. We create a lot of public awareness on organ donation. We do training of paramedical and medical staff for organ donation and transplantation. We place grief counselors in hospitals, in ICUs, for supporting families in their decision to donate. And we also work as a networking organization. We network with government and hospitals to put up policies to improve disease donation rate in India. Brain death and organ donation, the potential of brain death in India is huge because we have close to 8.4 million people dying every year, of which 1 to 4% are brain death, which, if you convert that, that runs into 100,000, almost 300,000 on the upper limit. We also have huge number of road traffic accidents, unfortunately, and young people dying in road traffic accidents. Because our traffic is chaotic. If you've been to India, you know what I'm talking about. And we have 400 deaths in a day, close to 147,000 fatal deaths every year due to road traffic accidents. 67% in these deaths have head injury. And our estimated brain injuries are about 95,000. So maybe we have a huge number of brain deaths just from the road traffic accident numbers. And these deaths are considered as medical legal, and they can be problematic when you want to donate organs in this situation, if the family wants to donate. There are some weak links in the disease donation program in India. There are various reasons why the disease donation rate may be low in this part of the world. We do disease donation. We do close to about 900 disease donors in our country, which translates to about 0.7, 0.8 per million population because we have a large population. In the hospital itself, unfortunately, there is no mechanism for identifying, certifying, and maintaining brain death. Families are not supported in a decision to donate. And there is also lack of surgical training. While we do a huge number of living donations and transplantation, but disease donor transplants are a lot less. It meets about 15% of our requirement for organs. So sometimes surgical units are not trained into disease donation, which are doing more living donation transplants. Also, in the medical legal situation where there's a road traffic accident, there is postmortem required. And this can delay the whole donation process because the police and the forensics are involved in that kind of donation. So training, and capacity building to improve disease donation requires, training of ICU staff to tell them about brain death, training of coordinators, how to request for organs, how to support families, training surgeons, and also it requires police sensitization and training in our part of the world. We do a lot of intensive care workshops as a foundation. We started doing this in 2015 we started, and we've trained close to 655 healthcare professionals in ICU. This is a video showing you how we train ICU professionals. These are 4 to 6 hours workshops. These are hands-on workshops where we teach them about the organ donation pathways, the communication skills, the family conversation, role allocation, how to maintain brain death, and so on. This is a short video. Let me see if we play.
Rule out any contraindications.
So this is on organ donation pathway. Communication skills improve, and organ allocation.
You can have your own job.
And these are quite popular to run, and this helps us. We also created an app for both brain death certification and for donor optimization. This is freely available on App Store, both on the Apple App Store and on Google. We developed this with NHSBT UK because we do have an MOU with them for good practices. The training of transplant coordinators is first of its kind in South Asia. We do have face-to-face and again online self-learning with faculty interaction once a week. We do that as well. The pricing for these courses are free for government hospital candidates. They're normally priced for private hospitals. The 1-month training program costs them about $60. and the 1 year cost them about $200 US. So the transplant coordinators professional course, we have two courses. One is a 1 month course, a short course for ICU nurses. And we have a 1 year course for people who are not exposed to transplants. And these are from social work background. We have a lot of social workers who actually enter the field of transplant coordination, and they need a lot more training than an ICU nurse would need. A 1 month program is mostly a weekend program now. It's done online. This was a 1 week program, which we converted 1 month online program, and they do they do it in their own time. The core components of this is just like David had. There's a medical component, there's a legal and ethical religious component, grief counseling, and transplant coordination. The course duration, the 1 year course is about 480 hours of learning. And we say that you need to do 2 hours for 5 days a week, 4 times, 4 weeks and 12 months, 480 hours it comes to. The 1 month is a 40 hours training. We have 75 modules in the 1 year program for that can take up 375 hours of viewing. The assignments in the 1 year, there is contact sessions, 5 days where we teach them soft skills on how to do family counseling and so on. And then they have some application related visits, which they like a project. And then we have an examination from time to time. And this is how the 1 year is distributed. And similarly, the 1 month is distributed. So these are some videos which I will show you for that we have text, we have PowerPoint, and we have videos in these modules. So this is a text module, which I'll show you. This is done on Moodle, which is a free platform. This talks about types of transplants, allograft, isograft, and goes through all the theory components on the course. And then we have PowerPoint presentations, which they can see in their own time. This is on our law on Transplantation of Human Organ Act. And then we have these video modules. And this is on BK virus by Anil Chandrakar.
My name is Anil Chandrakar. I'm the medical director of the kidney transplant program at the Brigham Women's Hospital. And today I'm going to talk about BK virus nephropathy in kidney transplant recipients. BK is a very important.
We have 70 modules, 60 video lectures, and then contact sessions. We have tests and quizzes, and then assignments and projects. So this is how it is distributed. Our training program, which we started from December 2009, now in the last 12 years, 13 years, we've had candidates not only from India, but also other countries, including, especially South Asia, and including countries like Botswana, Nigeria, and Spain more recently. We've done 86 training programs in all this time, 69 face-to-face, 17 online programs. We have trained close to 3,000 candidates, face-to-face and online. We also collaborate with our national body called the National Organ and Tissue Transplant Organization, with the Ministry of Health, to run these courses. We also collaborate with our state governments, many state governments, hospitals, and armed forces. Recently, we thought that there's a requirement for short courses, something like family conversation for organ donation, which intensive care people want to take. And this is a 15-hour module, which we've done online. And this talks about breaking bad news, stages of grief, approaching family. And we do case simulations in this short modules, which is also available, of course, in the long course.
But it looks like my child is just sleeping.
Yes, Varsha, because it is the ventilator machine which is pushing air in and out of her lungs. With all the tests, what we found is she's no more and not able to breathe on her own.
Is there any chance that Shakti can be brought back to life?
So these are short videos. It takes, as David showed, these are actually actors who were filmed, and these videos take a long time to create. A lot of hard work is required to create this module. So we have many such case scenarios on which we show them the videos. One was on directed donation, and then denial, being in the state of denial and being anger, how they react sometimes when you speak about organ donation, so how to handle those families. So we teach them about how to break bad news and how to support the family in organ donation. We also have a short course on the legal course, because the law is a very tough law in India, and sometimes it requires a lot of understanding. Again, all these courses are very interactive. They are done on Moodle. the candidates constantly has to be kept engaged, and there are tests in these modules constantly whether the candidates understands or not. In this legal case, we also put up case scenarios where there is a legal case against some aspect of organ donation and what the judgment was in that case. We have a short course on brain death as well, an 8-hour course to sensitize the ICU doctors. They can do it in their own time. This is all part of when after COVID, we couldn't do face-to-face, so we brought a lot of these courses online and made them short courses.
This subject with a story.
This is a video on brain death.
And what you see before you is one of the most famous books on anatomy ever written, De Corpore Fabrica Humani, or The Fabric of the Human Body, written by a very celebrated anatomist by name of Andrea Vesalius. And this is Andrea Vesalius. And my story concerns him. He used to live in Madrid in Spain. And in 1564, this gentleman performed an autopsy on a very important person in Spain. However, when the chest was opened, the heart was still found to be beating. And that was a bit of a disaster for Vesalius, because the relatives of this patient thought that he had killed the gentleman, and Vesalius was forced to leave Spain. Which brings us to an interesting question, as what Vesalius might have asked himself, and what we ask ourselves even today, is what are the signs of death?
So these videos have been created again on the green mat, as David has shown, and then edited and then put forward. So it is a good experience for the candidates to view these videos and understand the subject. And we do use faculty who are very articulate and who are able to deliver it well, and who do a lot of homework. And we've had a very good feedback of some of these courses which we are doing. And this is a candidate from Spain, Sona, who gave a feedback that during the course, various methodologies were used for teaching, such as real-life case discussion, role plays, panel discussion. I believe these methodologies are very helpful to us to learn and others to develop our own skills in communication and teamwork. Currently, I'm in Spain, and in future, I hope to work one day in transplant coordinator. So the feedback is good for these courses. Again, in the COVID times, there was a requirement, to promote organ donation. So we started a program for general public called an ambassadors program, and we put up a short 4-hour course on organ donation itself. And then we went on to do other courses on how to take care of kidney, liver, lungs, and so on. As I said, all these modules are on Moodle. This is a free open source software. And what we have been doing lately is we have been experimenting more and more with our courses, and we're trying to see whether we can bring gamification in these courses. Let me just show you this course on
kidney.
kidney.
The kidneys are part of the excretory system. The system, besides the kidneys, consists of ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra.
And so these are interactive courses where the course stops, the slide stops, and you have to answer before you go forward. So that way the candidate that the candidate has learned or not, and then you use this course. We are using gamification. This is putting a kidney together as a jigsaw puzzle, and we give the candidates a certain amount of time, and they can put the kidney together, learn about the anatomy of the kidney, and then get marks. Similarly, this is a gamification kind of again exercise which the candidate can do. And we're finding in this kind of interactive learning where we do gamification in learning seems to be more attractive, and we seem to be getting good feedback, but we're just experimenting with these kind of learning methods. Again, good feedback. We also run a surgical course for organ retrieval. We have a tie-up with Oxford for that. We are trained in 5 workshops, about 199 surgeons. These are some of the surgeons, and this training is done in a wet lab, a cadaver lab in one of the medical colleges in Bangalore. And we do get some faculty coming from UK. This is under the NHS BT MOU which we have, and these are again very popular with the surgeons. And we teach them both. We teach them both multi-organ for abdominal retrieval and transplantation, and also for thoracic organs. And the impact of these courses has been very good. we had this surgeon who was from a government medical college who had never seen a heart transplant. And he came to the course, did some training in 2 days, went back and did 4 heart transplants. Similarly, we had another surgeon who came from Gujarat, and he went back and did transplant. So impact of these training courses, on-hand training courses, have been very good. The police sensitization is very important because, police is responsible for organ donation when there is a medical legal case in India. So we do a lot of police sensitization. As I said, a huge number of brain deaths due to road traffic accidents. And, the body in a medical legal case belongs to the state unless it is handed over to the relatives after the post-mortem. So that's why training of a police investigating officer becomes important, because otherwise it delays the whole organ donation process, because they go into all kinds of details which are not necessary. So we come out with a manual for the police on the legal medical aspects, and given it to them. We put it on their website. We put posters in the police stations. And this kind of training has actually reduced the post-mortem delays from 24 hours to 8 to 12 hours. So it has had good impact. Overall, all this training which we've been doing for the last 12 years has had an impact on the organ donation in India. And we've had close to 1,900 odd brain deaths, which have been facilitated by the trained transplant coordinators from the foundation, which has resulted in many organs and many tissues. We also had missed opportunity in disease donation in brain death, where patients have not had this possible to have second apnea test, and then they have gone on to just do tissue donation. And in all this time, we've had many corneal, skin, bone, and heart valve donation from these kind of missed opportunities. So in 5 years of all the training which we did, if you look at the figures from 2012 to 2017 in India, I mean, slightly busy slide, but if you see the donation, we had 196 donors in 2012, and in 2017, this went up to 905, and this resulted in 1,600 odd kidneys, livers, heart, lungs, hand, and so on. And our donation rate went up by 4.5 times. In COVID, it took a slump, and we're slowly starting to rise again. So in summary, we feel the key to success of disease donor transplant program is training and capacity building, and training of ICU doctors along with transplant coordinators is very important. Surgeons require training for optimal organ retrieval and transplantation. In our part of the world, police plays a key role, and it needs engagement and sensitization. And I think with the COVID, hybrid teaching with online courses is very convenient and very cost effective. This is my team of the foundation, and many of them are good faculties. These are some of the leading ladies in our foundation who are faculty also for the course. Thank you very much. The course is available on el@mohanfoundation.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of our speakers. That was 2 very humbling talks of some incredible work that's obviously been going on all around the world for a number of years now. I'd encourage anybody watching, if any questions, please put them either in the chat or the Q&A box. I've got one question first of all to David, if that's okay. And what you've developed is an incredible resource. We found in the UK that our biggest bar to donation happening was our intensive care consultants. And so we aimed our education, particularly medically, at those people who are about to become consultants. It's interesting that you've gone for medical students. Is that because they were, with the compulsory nature of your course, is that because they were an easy audience to capture?
So it's been interesting because the educationalists will ask you, who are you aiming at? And it's been very interesting to see the feedback, because I've pitched it at medical student level, but it's applicable for, in principle, the subspecialists, and I think they need that information as well. And even for the lay public doing it, I think they skip over the medical detail part, but they want to know about the other parts of the process and see it in context. So it's been well received on multiple levels. I have gone one step younger. I think our donors come a lot from the emergency departments, and they are often pushed by the younger people. I think younger minds are also more malleable, and that's another reason for that. And you do find that it's actually an institutional culture, and we don't have very strong regulatory hammers to institute. Everyone's operating in little silos in their hospitals. So I have gone one step lower, but I would agree. And I have been approached by emergency medicine as a discipline for postgraduate training that they want to incorporate it. And then you have a package that people can insert into their curriculum, because to reach 3,800 people, I think I would have lost my voice ages ago if I'd had to repeat it in chunks of 20. So I do think it's got these online resources exist, but understanding how people are consuming them, whether they're consuming them in the way that you want them to be, is something I think you need to have that human interaction with to be able to do it. And I know your course, in terms of you sit down the trainees and have a 2-day intensive, discussion, is also a very much more visceral, experienced process in terms of internalizing this learning. But I think for us, we have to start with the broader context at the start, because there's a lot of assumptions out there as to how our system works. We don't have an OPO, but people will watch it and think there must be an organ procurement organization. But we have a public awareness organization called the ODF, the Organ Donor Foundation, but that's not their role. They just spread a positive message, but they're not involved in the process anywhere. So I think you need to give the people a broader context, because people are supportive, but you need to channel it.
It's interesting you say people are supportive. So again, one of the problems we've had in the UK is actually sometimes meeting active resistance. Do you find that there's that resistance that you're having to overcome? Or are you hitting people early enough in the training, or is there still that resistance in the more senior levels of the medical fraternity?
So yes, there are institutionalized bastions, neurosurgery in some places that do not see the world or the priority of donation. And I think that is a hard nut to crack. I haven't directly gone at it with a hammer, but the younger generation of neurosurgeons have to rotate through my ICU. So I think getting yourself embedded into the training program is very definitely the point to start. I've also tried community engagement. We've got a very big Muslim community, and to engage with their religious leaders with a training resource. It's that intersection between medical science and culture and religion, and medical science doesn't offer much when the body's got to go into the ground. And there's a definite handover of responsibility there that I think you need to bring to the fore, because a grieving family is reliant on both sides of that equation. So I've had interesting engagement there. So when you meet resistance, how do you handle it? I think you have to go back to the science and for constructive engagement, but it's like anti-vaxxers. There are some people you're not going to convince. And I think you may waste a lot of effort with no reward. And I think you have to pick and choose your education battles. But I think it's a war we can win in the end.
Lovely. Kathy.
Thank you, David. Thanks, Ben. There's a question in the chat regards the costs. So this is a fabulous, really shiny package. It does look really amazing and impressive. So the question's twofold. How much did it cost? And how did you decide what software or format to use? What was your decision making around the software?
Sunil, do you want to answer?
Yeah, we decided to use, as far as software is concerned, the open source, and Moodle is a good software to use. We didn't have a large audience, so Moodle can handle smaller audience very well. It has also a lot of plugins available, free of cost, which you can download and use in your software. And the plugins can help you to create quizzes, make the videos interactive, put your tests, track your students' progress, do an audit from time to time. So these are all plugins. You don't have to write a code for that. It automatically does it, just as long as you can get a plugin. The only slight disadvantage with Moodle is it keeps upgrading the software very frequently. So you need to have somebody who's slightly trained in Moodle to be able to help you with upgrading it. And you should really be, with the open source also, there's a little danger of hacking. So you have to be very careful with all your cyber security measures, which you need to take. That's the only drawback. Otherwise, Moodle is great. We started with a very low-end version, and today we have a very high-end version in Moodle, which we are using. And it is absolutely wonderful because we are discovering new and new plugins, which makes the course, very interactive. Previously the videos were, we used to have a 20 minutes video which you just play, but now the videos are, we put a question in between. So we have 5 or 6 questions in a 20-minute video. So we know the progress of the student, whether the student is actually understanding or not. And as David said, that our pass percentage is pretty high because the assessment happens as they're learning. And that's the beauty of the online course, that you don't have to wait till the end of the class to have an assessment. So assessment is constantly happening of the candidate. So that's why we use Moodle, the software part. As far as the, this to create this resource requires extraordinary hard work. It requires a lot of hours of dedication, a lot of video editing, knowing the technicality. It's not so easy to develop these courses. It can be expensive, having 2 cameras, with lights, with your, green mat, and then editing it afterwards. I think it all takes a lot of time. What is a 5 minutes video can take you almost a month to create, So these resources are, can be expensive, but once created, they have a good shelf life. And that's why we are now able to use the same resources which we created for 1-year course, which we did about 6 or 7 years back. We are able to recycle them for short courses as well. So that's the one advantage which we have. We are able to cull out multiple courses from one course which we have, and that's an advantage. I hope I've answered the question to some extent.
Yeah, it's probably difficult to put an overall cost on it, Sunil, I presume. You can't really pluck a figure out the air.
Yeah, I can maybe talk to R1. We spent about 180,000 Rand was what the university quoted me, which translates to about £9,000. I think that there's a big uncosted component there. I think you're paying for professional videographer services, renting the filming venue, but there's a lot you can get done on goodwill and academic naivety of myself in terms of how much time this would take up in terms of putting the scripts together and writing them. So it took us about 6 months to produce our course once we pulled the trigger on actually starting it. But like Sunil says, you're really creating a resource that can stand the test of time. I've been asked by people, why don't I do something on ECMO or something like that? I'm like, that is a rapidly developing field. I'm not going to spend 6 months of my time. Brain death has been around for 50 years and we are finally settling on minimum standards, but those standards have been around the world for a long time. So I was really comfortable spending this much of time creating a resource that can then spread further and is not prone to be edited because someone's changed the core temperature value from 38 to 36, or you have to come back and re-edit your videos to make sure they're relevant every time people change the guidelines. So I kept mine suitably broad that I don't have to go back, and you're teaching the principle of a core temperature that's acceptable.
Brilliant. So a brilliant resource that stands the test of time. Just before I move back to Ben, I was interested in both presentations around the family counselling or the softer side. I noticed you had some really well-produced videos. I just wondered where they factored into your training in terms of context. So where would the videos be shown and where perhaps practical sessions would be shown? So is it face-to-face that you would do that element, or is it in the online version?
So if I can take that quickly, we started with face-to-face before COVID because we always felt soft skills are very difficult to teach, online. And then came COVID and we had no option because we couldn't continue our courses. So then we went online. And then we created these simulation modules. So we created, we took multiple scenes, which are common in organizational scenario in India. So we took 4 or 5 scenes, and then we created a video on each scenario, that this is what the scenario is, and this is what happened, and what would you do? So these are short videos, about 5 to 10 minutes. And we use actually professional actors. They're very expensive to produce, but all the same, it came out quite well. And now we use it online for training, and it seems to be quite effective. I don't know what the impact is going to be overall, because it's still too early to gauge it, whether they've learned the soft skills in the right way or not. You know, some certain things are very difficult to quantify when you actually want to, you know, look at the impact. You know, so especially the soft skills, you know, and everybody's take on soft skills is a little different. So this is one area which we were struggling, I must say. That's why we in all our training, this was the only component in our 1 year training. We used to have 1 week of only soft skills training for the coordinators. And as you know, this is the most important aspect in the whole, the family conversation is the most important aspect. But what we also found was that doctors are very poor at communication. They've never, at least in India, they've never been trained into end of life care or talking to the family. So this family conversation videos actually are working well with the doctors as well, who really don't wish to come to a workshop. But when they look at these videos, they get an idea that, okay, these are the soft skills they need to have, you know. So this, I think the videos in the long run will do well. That's what our feeling is.
Thank you, Sunil. I'll hand over to Ben. Thank you.
David wanted to say something.
Yes,
Oh, sorry,
David.
So just in terms of the soft skills, it's a difficult thing to assess in an MCQ. Inbuilt to ours is sort of an optional honors assignment where it's very easy to automate MCQ marking, but actually there's two assessments at the end of the second week. We actually ask the student if they optionally want to do this, to type down what they would actually say to break the bad news. And then the system on Coursera allows for 2 other students to mark that assessment, and you only get your mark back for that if you've marked so many other people's things. So now there's a cross-pollination between how people learn from what other people said, and then how do you actually grade how someone writes it? Well, we try to use like a Likert scale. So would you rate this in terms of empathy and clarity? Because someone might be very clear about the death, but did it come across as empathetic? And there's a trade-off there. They may come across as too empathetic and then lose clarity. And also you may think what you're doing is perfect, but having feedback from someone, that's always going to be an honest opinion. That's someone's valid interpretation of what you said. So it's been interesting to see that go through. Again, as Sunil said, we don't quite know how effective these are. And I know in-person training gives you a chance to debrief and you get that real-time feedback from, did your learning actually impact that person? Again, we don't know how well that translates to the practice when they go back to their ICU. You know, they might be fine in that environment. So I think that there's an effect that assessing the effect, you can assess it straight away, and then you're always going to improve knowledge. Did that stick for the next 5 years? That's another thing to ask. And did it change practice is another thing to ask, which I think the education literature needs to follow through on, because we're all doing this with the best intentions, but I don't know that our science of understanding it is, I think it's going to change with time.
That's fantastic, David. Thank you. I really like that cross-pollination idea and one another learning from each other by their transcripts, by what they write. And I quite like your measures as well around empathy and whether it come across caring and clear. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you. A question for both panelists from Reinhard Milner, who's the UK paediatric donation lead. And to both speakers, what has the impact been on your excellent training resources on the overall end of life care for patients and families? I think, Dave, you just said it's difficult to measure, but do you have a feeling of having seen the effects of your training schemes actually on the shop floor, as it were?
So because I've invested so far away, I think what I see is probably related to my own practice in my hospital, that I see with my own eyes because of my role in the hospital. I'm waiting to hear for the referral to come through that, no, I learned this from this organ donation course that I did, and I'm phoning up from such and such a hospital, which may be miles away. I think it very definitely has a spin-off on palliative care. That's a growing discipline in South Africa. It's not well practiced in the ICU. Everyone thinks that it's just hospice related and you go there with your terminal cancer. It is so much more than that. And they are very definitely trying to teach the same set of skills we are as well. So I think there's a real synergy with that. And again, I think that's happening because of individuals in our hospital. So we don't actually see it directly, but I think we are using palliative care more in ICU, especially on the back end of COVID. I think that really shone a spotlight on what's going on and was really hard for people when families, I know, UK, it was very difficult to visit. We overruled our hospital management really early on in the pandemic because taking that away from the clinicians, that engagement is frankly inhumane, and it's part of our job and what we offer. So I think it is happening, but it's a transition, and we haven't focused on it as an important aspect of what we graduate as medical students. And I really do think we shy away from it and run away from it, and we need to confront that and empower people not to do that, because it's something we need to offer.
Thank you. Sunil.
Yeah. One great advantage when you have a trained coordinator in your ICU is that, that it's just not brain death, which they have family conversation. It is anybody who is very serious or ill. And the family conversation starts right from the beginning, right from the time of admission. So the communication skills are kept well. And that's one great advantage, especially with a very busy ICU, where the clinician themselves may not have so much of time to give to the family. So as far as, a public relation exercise for an ICU is concerned, I think having a trained grief counselor or coordinator is a big step forward for the ICU to keep the communication going. And I think it has definitely benefited some of these patients of end-of-life care, where a trained coordinator is able to speak to the family and, pacify some of the emotions sometimes when required. And also at the same time, a trained coordinator's results as far as, when in end-of-life care, when there is, somebody who's dying who may want to donate an organ or a tissue, the impact has been very good, because many of these families have gone on to at least donate a tissue they have donated a tissue, be it eyes or cornea donation is very popular in our country, and so that has happened. And as far as brain death is concerned and that conversion rate, we have actually done a study multiple times in our ICUs. A trained coordinator's conversion rate is between 60 and 70% with the families. If they support the family, getting a yes for donation is very likely. Whereas an untrained coordinator, the conversion rate is less than 30%. We've done this multiple times across the country in government, public care hospitals or private hospitals, and more or less the figures come to the same. So definitely overall the impact has been huge. I also showed a slide in my presentation where in 2012 our disease donation rate was only about 200 per year, whereas in 2017 we did 900 donations. And I think the large number of these donations have come because there were these trained people in the ICUs. India is a huge country, and not every region of the country does disease donation. We have 37 states and union territories, of which only 6 do disease donation of regularly. The rest don't do it, and that's why our donation rate is so much less. We do more disease donation in the south of the country, in the west of the country, not so much in the north and east of the country. But this is an evolving field. When we started way back in 1995, there were hardly any donations happening. But 25 years now, we are doing some donations. Number-wise, we do close to about 900 donations. But there are another 1,000 donations which could have happened, and these are missed opportunities where the families have actually said yes to donation. Thanks again to these trained coordinators, trained counselors who get a yes from donation. But somehow the brain death is not maintained well by the intensive care people. And sometimes they will crash. And that's why we have many missed opportunities in our donation in India. So overall, I think impact has been great.
It's interesting that the Indian figures are very similar to the UK figures in terms of those consent between having a trained requester and a random intensive care doctor, usually in the UK, going to ask those questions. And the UK numbers are very, very similar. That huge reduction when you haven't got someone who's trained in there. And David, I was interested you talking about that the palliation being such a big part. We've recognised within the training that we were running in the UK, that actually we started off the training thinking about organ donation and recognised that our intensive care doctors had almost no training in breaking bad news and that communication around end of life care. And so the course has morphed to cover all of those different things. But I've got lots of things that I'm now going to try and take out of your courses and your work. I'm sure Kathy's the same, that we're going to try and put into context within the UK. I think that's all the questions wrapped up, unless I've missed anything, Kathy?
No, that's it, Ben. I can't see any more in the chat. Somebody had just made a comment to say they'd never thought of the risk of an educational package getting hacked. So thank you for highlighting that risk and your really inspirational talks. It's been a pleasure this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you guys for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.